let us move on to the sequences. The first one is scope insensitivity. I guess I will quickly summarize it.
Yeah, I mean, this one I think we're all kind of familiar with.
Okay.
You can take the lead, or I can, whatever, or Jess can, whoever wants to.
I'll take the lead. No,
All
let's
right,
not.
ready? Let's all talk at once. 3. My read on scope insensitivity is it's our inability to do emotional math, basically.
We should really quickly point out a few things that he actually said in that.
Or actually in the
article.
post. Yeah, good point.
Okay, well, it starts off by quoting a study where subjects were asked how much they would pay to save 2,000, 20,000, or 200,000 migrating birds from drowning in oil ponds. And the answers were $80 for 2,000, $78 for 20,000, and $88 for 200,000. Basically all about the same amount. And the post goes on to show over and over in many different studies that this tends to be the same case. People, regardless of how the numbers are, they more or less choose the same amounts to fix things. The numbers seem to be more or less irrelevant.
It's worth pointing out that you have to ask different groups of people.
Yes.
You can't ask them one after the other.
Right. Obviously, if you ask them the same number, they would just multiply it by 10.
Well, actually, I sort of doubt that.
Because
part of my donating power, I might give, $50 to somebody's charity, but I can't. If they said, hey, you know what, this is actually going to help 50,000 people, not 5. I can't give $1,000 more dollars.
Oh, right.
Or 1,000 times as much, right?
Yeah.
So part of it's just by how much you have to give.
Well, I think what the article says is that it follows a logarithmic scale. So even though the problem may have gotten 10 times worse, you only emotionally give as though it got 1.5 times worse.
Yeah, I don't know if this is... Sorry?
Oh, I was just going to say, it's not that we are completely incapable of scaling up, or even that groups don't scale up. It's that once we find a point, whatever we can give, we don't really know how to do proportions correctly. We think the problem is twice as bad when it's 10 times as bad.
Yeah, I wonder if, and this might actually be controlled for in the study, but instead of how much would you give of your own money to save these birds, imagine that you're in charge of a fund for these birds, and how much would you allocate for these many birds versus these many? I wonder if that would change the way people are doing math, or if the scope insensitivity still applies.
It's too bad Katrina isn't here because she worked with nonprofits a lot, and she mentioned that they found if they showed pictures of large groups of people, the donations would often go down. But if it was just a picture of one person looking really sad, the donations would be much higher.
That's true as far as I know. I know that Sam Harris talks about this in his podcast all the time, but that's something that Will McCaskill and Peter Singer have been on about, that you show a picture of one sad little girl starving in Africa, you can elicit more charity for her than you can for her and her brother.
Yes.
At the same time, or her and her brother and their whole family.
Because so emotionally, it's hard to. You just can't feel that many people.
I think that there's a lot of components to it. Part of it, I think it's too generous to say that it even doubles when the problem goes up by 10, because the bird thing doesn't even map to that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a sense of how much will you give to save Africa, to your average American teleprom, or what do you call them, telephone charity things, right? Telethons.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. I can't save Africa. Why am I going to throw my money in the bucket, into that fire? That's not going to do anything. But I can save that girl.
Right.
I think there's an efficacy that comes into play too. You start feeling more hopeless the more people you start adding to that equation.
Right.
First of all, it depresses you, and then secondly, you're thinking about what can I do to solve this whole village's problems.
Yeah, it seems totally futile to ask, can you save these 1,000 people? I think that's part of it. But yeah, the post goes on to talk about a bit more too. So, but I think that's the general thrust of the essay, right? That this is a problem of human cognition.
Yes.
And I think in the way to think about it is that we can't multiply emotionally, which is probably good.
Is it
Keeps us
good?
from going insane.
Well, imagine I could be really bummed to learn that one person died.
Yeah.
And if I was 1,000 times as bummed to learn that 1,000 people died, I'd probably just kill myself.
Yeah. If every now and then we hear about a celebrity that died, right? When Alan Rickman died, everyone was super bummed because he's cool. We really loved him as Snape and all of his other roles, right? But then you learn that 6 million people were killed in World War II just in the extermination camps, and you're like, that's a statistic. I can't multiply Alan Rickman's death by even 10, much less 6 million. That's just a number on a paper.
Yeah, and I mean, part of it is because we know we quote know Alan Rickman, right? But I mean, like, even if I'm just trying to think of,
Yeah, but even if you're thinking about 1,000 Alan Rickmans, that doesn't...
You can't emotionally think about 1,000 Alan Rickmans.
Isn't that related to, I forget if this is called Dunbar's number? Where
Oh, probably.
you also can only kind of mentally keep track of about 100 friends,
100 to 150. Yeah.
acquaintances.
That might be related to that. I mean, but I don't know if Alan Rickman's in my monkey sphere, right, or in my Dunbar circle. Like, it's. I mean, and earlier this week, a coworker told me that he knew somebody who died, and I was like, "Oh, that's terrible!" Like, because they just died like Monday, and like, it sucks, and it bummed me out a little bit. But I didn't know this person. The guy that was telling me this didn't know him that well, and so, it wasn't that tragic. I mean, I was probably more bummed when name a celebrity died or something, right? But that's sort of an aside. Sorry.
Were you saying something, David?
No, let me think this through before I speak. You guys go on.
Okay. He did also point out the same thing in this post that you said, that people were more willing to give when they could save 4,500 lives in a camp of 11,000 rather than 4,500 lives in a camp of 250,000, just because it was a larger percentage of the whole problem. So felt like they could maybe contribute in some meaningful way.
Yeah.
Whereas 4,000 people out of 250,000 just doesn't feel like doing much to address the problem.
Right, and that sounds good. Or let me rephrase that. Fixing that problem sounds like something that we should do.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like, if I could tweak my brain to be 1,000 times sadder if 1,000 people died than if it was one, I don't think I would.
Right.
What I should do is just curb my actual response, like my behavior to the problem, and scale that up rather than like my emotional response.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you would want to ramp up the emotions associated with that, and just go into a horrible depression every time you think about sad things.
Exactly.
But being able to think about it, maybe in a practical terms, I don't know if this is even possible neurologically.
I think it's possible to try to base your actions on the numbers rather than the emotions.
I think that's what EA tries to do. I mean,
yeah, that's the entire.
I think that would be like the people who I think are doing the most about these sorts of problems right now are the effective altruists who, first of all, have kind of said, like, if you make above whatever the kind of baseline, like you're living a comfortable life salary, then in order to,
I think it was like $62,000, but it's probably going to go up to 65 in the next few years with inflation, but somewhere around there.
Yeah, for the U.S. Then it is good to contribute 10% of your income to charity, to effective charities. And then, like, I like that because it's one simple thing that you're doing. It's not like, I think a lot of people who want to be altruistic can get burned out by, there's so many causes, which ones do I pick? Am I not devoting enough my attention, time, money to this important thing over here? What about animal welfare? What about rape victims? What about Africa? Africa.
I use that also tongue-in-cheek. It's just...
I know. But, yeah, like, it's like, okay, what do we do? Well, let's target the worst problems, and let's find the best solutions for the worst problems, and let's find the way that we can get the money the most efficiently to where it needs to be, and use it in the best way.
Yeah.
Totally.
Let's tackle the problem with math as much as we can.
Yeah.
And my whole digression on emotions I should have set up better, which was that I think that the reason that people give consistent numbers across orders of magnitudes of dead birds is because they respond with a dollar amount proportional to how emotional they feel about it, right? And I think even in the post he says, like, they imagine one dying bird, be like, oh, that's sad, and they might be able to picture 100. They might be able to picture 50 or 100, but they can't picture 20,000. Yeah. And if they picture a swarm of birds that's 20,000, they can't accurately scale it up to make it 200,000 in their heads.
Or at least if they're going by their guts.
Exactly. So their emotional attunement to the problem is how much is a plausible explanation for how much they give.
He also brought up the.
So.
Oh, you go ahead.
Oh, What I was going to say is, as a theoretical way to deal with this, one of the things you could do as a rationalist is before you hear a plea for your money, make your own mental guess of how many people were affected and how much money you would donate. Like, write down before they say, like, this, like, a flock blank big was affected. Before you hear the number, write down what you think and what you would be willing to give. And then see the difference between the two. Like, if you said, I would give $70 for 200 birds, and then the newscaster says it's 200,000, I think that would give you pause. Maybe you can't give like 1,000 times more, but you would at least look at your number 70 and be like, I definitely need to make this go a lot higher.
I might just give the $70 and say, I hope that one bird. And the other 199,000 of them, I hope they find 199,000 other people with $70.
That's a good point.
That's
yeah,
true.
'cause you can't solve
On
it.
a practical level, I think Jess is right. Like a once a year or once a month tithe is something that if everyone did it, the world would be better, and it's pretty goddamn good.
Eliezer did also bring up the alternate theory that people may be moral satisficers, where they see something bad and they feel guilty, and so they do something to feel better, and then they feel better and they're done. They got that warm, happy glow of helping to contribute in some way, and the actual number doesn't matter at all. It's just a matter of relieving moral guilt.
Or even just looking for warm fuzzies.
Yeah.
There was the post about keeping your eudolons and your warm fuzzies separate.
Yeah, I think that's
Which,
coming up soonish.
Yeah, so maybe I won't talk about it now, but I think that was another good way of addressing the kind of disconnect between wanting to satisfy morals and wanting to actually help.
I should clarify. I'm explaining, I think, the internal algorithm in like non-rationalist people's brains. Yeah, we as rationalists were aware of the problem. We should do better now that we're aware that this glaring issue exists. But I know I've told this before, but it's probably been years. I had a roommate who's gay, and we were leaving King Supers, and it was one of those like bell guys for Salvation Army, and he threw his change into the guy's bucket, and I was like, you realize that like this is one of the groups that gives to like anti-gay rights and stuff, and he was like, I don't care where the money goes, it just made me feel nice to give. That's exactly what he actually said.
Yeah.
And he's a great guy, but it was just an example of like, oh, okay, so like you really like this could have been anything, and it was just about, I think that sort of thing goes on all the time with people who just give a couple bucks to something. If you're going to sit down and write $1,000 check, I hope the average person sits down and actually thinks about it. But actually, the average person doesn't sit down and write down $1,000 charity check. So
I have a hard time not giving when people are, if you're in PetSmart and they're like, oh, do you want to give an extra dollar to the Save the Puppies Foundation? And you're a jerk if you don't, right? But I'm like, but I could also send this dollar to the Bill Gates Foundation and buy a bunch of mosquito nets to save children from malaria, and it would go a lot further.
Yeah. I have a policy of if people ask me at the cash register to round up or donate $1 or whatever, I have a policy of always saying no. I didn't have time to look into this. I feel like I'm being mugged right now, so no, you cannot have my money.
I like it. I mean, that's one approach. I tend to just it's completely random. Sometimes if I've heard of the charity, I'll round up. And sometimes if I've heard of it, I won't. Like if I know, like I never round up to give to the pink ribbon breast cancer thing, because I know all they do is spend 90-something% on buying more pink ribbons. So like they're not getting my money, but yeah.
It's especially suspicious if there's a store that's trying to get you to donate to a charity, because it's like, oh, now Walmart is altruistic, and it's like, what are you trying to do? You're trying to improve your own company self-image by like branding yourself as a charitable corporation.
Yeah.
You don't actually care about these puppies.
I had a job like this. I used to be a canvasser for Save the Children. So I was one of those people who'd wear a yellow vest and get you to stop on the street corner and give me your credit card.
Damn. Shady.
It was, dude, that was a hard sales job.
I bet.
Real hard. People spit on me in Philly. Someone threw beer bottles at me.
Why would they spit on you?
Because it's Philly.
People are insane in Philadelphia.
Can confirm.
Always Sunny was a documentary.
The city of brotherly love.
More than anyone likes to admit. Anyway, the reason I bring it up is while it was very hard to get people to sign up initially, once people did, we had a very high retention rate. Because as a charity, one of the things they do really well is every month you get a letter in the mail from a kid you're helping.
Ah.
Yeah, I used to
Like
donate
a
to that charity
picture.
when I was a kid.
It's yeah, and my family did it as well for a while, and I don't think they're that efficient, and in fact I'm a little afraid to look up how wasteful they are, but I know that at least some of the money they give does good. And by giving people that dopamine hit every month and they know they can expect it, it helps that charity carry forward. I think that if you created like a stock portfolio of charities where you donated 10% and then every month you were like, hey, here's the little kid who this month your money went to go buy them a net over their bed. And next month, here is a little kid in a different part of the world who has clean drinking water today because of your percentage contribution.
Let's move on to the next one. Oh,
Yeah.
wait, looks you had a thought?
No, I think that's about it. I mean, I guess we kind of talked around a lot of the stuff, but the post talks about this is scope and sensitivity, and here's like that's not the way that it should work. It's a really straightforward short post.
Yeah. Eliezer even ends it at the end with the moral of the story is, if you want to be an effective altruist, you have to think it through with the part of your brain that processes those unexciting inky zeros on paper, not just the part that gets really worked up about that poor struggling oil-soaked bird. Which is, yeah, being effective is about math.
Yep.
All right.
I guess what I was talking about is more like the next post.
The next post is One Life Against the World.
Such a cool, dramatic sounding name.
Yeah.
Whoever saves a single life, it is as if he has saved the whole world. The Talmud.
Sanhedrin 4:5. I think the main point of this post is the world really is bigger than one person. So even though it feels like saving the world if you save one person, you should generally choose the world above the one person if you're ever given that choice.
Yeah, something that makes me mad in a lot of media is, like, we as a culture think that it is morally good to, when, like, your character, your protagonist, has to choose between his love interest and
Oh my god.
the world, and they're like, I'm gonna save the love interest, and we're like, oh, how romantic, and I'm like, bad utilitarian.
So as much as I loved Avengers, what was the first one, not the last one?
Infinity War?
Infinity War. As much as I loved Avengers Infinity War, I was so fucking pissed when everyone was like, you know what? We're going to protect Vision no matter what. You can't have his stone. Or we're not going to take his stone out and crush it, you know? And it's like literally half of all intelligent life in the universe versus this one guy that the people like a lot.
A lot of bad utilitarianism went on in that movie.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. That was not even the only case. There was several cases of people being like, the entire fucking world, or this one guy.
I think it wasn't even the world. It was like the universe, right? Like,
right, yes.
Or that universe.
To be fair to the Avengers. so like another good example of this would be in the first Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire, when Goblin's got the cart full of kids and Mary Jane hanging from the bridge, and he ends up saving both, but he jumps after her first. Like the protagonists aren't supposed to be utilitarian monsters, right? They're supposed to be people with like human goals and feelings. And so, granted,
yeah, but at some point you draw the line.
They do, and well, at some point they did in Infinity War, right? They decided, hey, you know what? If we start, like, they had no idea how much time they had. It could have been days. And so when they went to go, get the stone out safely, which is a good option if you think you might have days and it might take a couple hours to get the stone out, whatever.
That's true.
It turned out they got ambushed right away. So when that happened, they're like, all right, it's time to fucking kill him. And they didn't, the person who could do it held off for all of the 8 seconds that it took to agonizingly stare at the person she loved before she blew his brains out, right? So,
okay.
Like, they did do it.
Okay.
So, but point taken.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly,
so this
could you imagine how bad the movie would have been if the second they got this news and they believed it, Cap just turned to Vision and smashed him in the face with his shield and, like, tried to kill him? Like,
that's a good point.
So, they have to...
It would have been better if Vision looked at him and he's like, you know what you need to do, and bashed his own face against
I think actually, I don't know if I'm
that
remembering
would've
this
been
correctly, but I'm pretty sure Vision himself was like, no, you should do it. And the rest of the team were like, no, man, we don't we don't give up our own.
That is accurate.
He's
We
like,
don't
"No,
trade
really."
lives was their thing.
Yeah, we don't trade lives. He's like,
And then, of course,
like,
Vision
but
points out the hypocrisy, like, Captain, didn't you down a ship that, to save everybody else? And it's like, fuck off, Vision. Just kind of it's PG-13, so he didn't say that, but his eyes did. So
There's also a thing with, I think more to the people on the right that if someone is a couple, then and they have children, the mother shouldn't be put in danger. And I saw this in some books I've read where both couples had superpowers, and the author made the mother stay home rather than help find the world-ending threat. But I also saw this in response to Avengers Endgame, where someone made like that super weird racist misogynist cut or something that just cut out all the women from the movie or whatever. And
I didn't hear about this.
The comment was that Pepper Potts should not be on the front lines fighting Thanos, because if Iron Man what's Iron Man's character's name? Tony Stark. If Tony Stark dies and Pepper dies, that child is now an orphin. And I was like,
I don't think they had a kid, but I get what you're saying.
did
no,
have a
they
kid
did
in
have
that
a kid in the
They
last
did?
one. Yeah.
Oh.
And the point is that if Pepper can change the odds of them winning by even a minuscule fraction, she should be in that fight, because that kid isn't going to live anyway if they lose.
Yeah, that's... I
When
feel
you're
like
fighting
that,
an existential threat like that, you don't bother with that kind of...
Yeah, you can stay at home and hug your kid right up until you're killed, or
Right.
you can go out and try and fight.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I can't imagine who would be trying to make that reverse argument in good faith.
And I mean, sure, both of them might die, and the rest of the team might save the world, and it turned out she wasn't needed there, and the kid could have still had a mom. But you know what? You don't take that kind of risk with the entire universe on the line.
And she might have helped. I mean, there wasn't...
Well, she did help a little bit in the
Yeah,
movie,
exactly.
right?
I mean, she definitely did, but, like, we don't know how much tide she turned, because you weren't able to see everything going on at the same time.
Right.
But, like, yeah, if she held things off for one more second, that's the second that we needed to win. So, yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
Even if she didn't help, it was still a better decision to put her on the battlefield than to keep her off on the sidelines.
Totally.
Absolutely. Yeah. She was useful. Okay, sorry. We got way off track.
Yeah.
I'll always indulge in an
I mean,
an
that was
Avengers
actually
side
on
rail.
topic.
Yeah.
We're talking about the saving one person still.
For once, the Avengers are relevant.
Yeah.
That said, I saw the new Spider-Man movie last night. It was a lot of fun. Subverted my expectations twice, which was really cool.
Cool.
So it was like Homecoming, like the same kind of vibe, but it was a lot of fun. So if you like superhero movies, I give it my thumbs up. But that's not a surprise. Jess saw it too.
I liked it more than Homecoming because, just for me personally, I don't like high school dramas. I think it's the target market. I think they do a great job with, okay, like here's the high school vibe. Peter Parker is the high school kid, and we're going to have stories that are about crushes and school. I hate all of that. I hated high school. This one has much less of that going on and much more superhero stuff, so I was into it.
I will say this post is the first one where I discovered that Eliezer is absolutely against mind-altering substances and drugs, those sorts of things, where he says that the experience of making a new scientific discovery is my best reference for what it might feel like to do drugs. And I thought that was an interesting fact about him. And later when I met him at Worldcon, several years later, I found out that he doesn't even drink. I think I had half a glass of wine once in his life.
I wonder if he's changed his opinions on that regarding, first of all, nootropics and psychedelics actually having interesting therapeutic and cognitive enhancing potential.
I don't know.
I saw a Q&A with him a few years ago, and he had said he doesn't do any of that stuff, mainly because he's worried about fucking with his brain chemistry, personally. I don't think he advocates not using it. I haven't heard him make a positive claim.
That's cowardly.
Well, it is, but
It is. Like, the evidence is strongly against him. At this point, millions of people have done it, and nobody has been...
I think
The percentage of people who've done it intelligently and safely is
I think
small.
his concern is that he has an atypical brain that he's worried about screwing with, and like if it's currently working for him, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right. Or if it ain't broke, don't fuck with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is completely within someone's rights to choose, and I respect their decision.
Absolutely. I also think that...
I'm gonna reduce my judgment from cowardly to overly cautious, in my opinion, but I do get where he's coming
Well,
from.
I think if you're
can get
one of
behind
the
that.
50 people in the world working on what you think is the most important problem for the human species, you might want to take a little extra care with your brain. Which I totally understand. What do you guys think? Like, I don't know what the high of making a new scientific discovery is like. It's probably not the same as a drug high. Like, I'm not sure they're even comparable, But I also think the new scientific discovery one is...
I know what this feeling is like.
Okay.
Or at least I have had a mini taste
All
of
right.
it. So I don't know if I mentioned this to you guys a while ago, but I found this little Buddhist palm manual of non-Newtonian calculus.
Oh, yes.
And
You did, but I think this may be an entire episode.
yeah, but the main point was I have been going through the process of deciphering this weird abstract form of math and finding new applications for it. And at least one of them was completely novel. Like, I've checked every academic source I could in multiple languages. I think I have a completely unique math paper. And I have done a lot of drugs in my life. And I can tell you, it is a comparable high, and the math one is better because it's not just a fleeting high. It's like a warm feeling of satisfaction that's growing more and more as I polish my work and work on my paper.
Yeah. I was going to say that I think that even if the drug one might be better for like a few minutes, like the drug thing goes away, whereas an accomplishment like that you have for the rest of your life.
And maybe I haven't tried the right drugs, but the
Yeah.
stuff I've tried, like, it's apples and oranges. Like, I mean, I guess because I'm always aware that I've taken a drug and that's why I feel this way. If I've done something nice for somebody and it's made them, if it's changed somebody's life, or if I figured something out, I've had small versions of both of those things. Not like an innovative scientific discovery, but for me, that's why I like programming. When I figure shit out, I get that rush. So it's a very small version of it because other people can do it. But when I do it originally, it feels nice. But the like with drug stuff, it's like, oh man, I feel crazy right now. This is fun. It's, I mean, you might as well be comparing, two other completely unrelated things. This is just like, listening to a good song. How does that compare to like the joy of a scientific discovery? It's like it doesn't. They're different. They're completely different sensations for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even like, I don't know. I'm not going to say I don't like recreational drugs. Some of them are alright, but I'm much more interested in modafinil, or cognitive enhancing drugs, nootropics, and even psychedelics are interesting for me because it helps me understand my own brain.
I mean, I like MDMA is the drug I was comparing it to, and that's just like a flood of happy chemicals.
Yeah, based on the context of the post, I was assuming that he meant like recreational, make you feel good and or happy.
Yeah, and I was thinking of MDMA too, but like I still like I'm on it and it felt great, but like I knew like that, it wasn't like it wasn't like I thought this feeling was fake because the feeling's real. Mm-hmm. It's as real as any feeling you can have because it's your actual brain. Mm-hmm. But it's like I knew it wasn't tethered to. And we're kind of aside, but yeah.
All right, so back to the post then. He says that it probably seems obvious to almost everyone that yes, the entire world is worth more than one life, but it might not be entirely that obvious to everyone. For example, people who follow the Greek conception of personal virtue, which rather than consequentialism, which I feel slightly called out on, not because I'm a Greek, but because I am a virtue ethicist. So he says, someone who saves the world is virtuous because they are fulfilling their duty to save life, which is a virtue. But they're not 6 billion times more virtuous than someone who only saved one life because they were also fulfilling that duty. They're certainly more virtuous if they save the whole world, but not 6 billion times more. And perhaps another way of not grasping this would be that the value of one human life is too great to comprehend anyway. So, like, a human just couldn't comprehend it, and it's like a scope insensitivity thing. If one life is so immensely valuable already, how can you even think about, saving the entire world? And he points out that, yes, he agrees one life is of unimaginably high value, but that 2 human lives are twice as unimaginably valuable. So, please save the entire world. If you have to.
If humanity could dedicate all of its resources towards, curing, whatever, puppy disease or ALS, like, he's saying, yes, that's good. You can't say it's not good, but, like, it is... we need to fix the most important thing, and to him, it's obviously friendly AI research, right? Mm-hmm. And he's probably right. Certainly, like, even like curing prostate cancer and breast cancer, like, great, both good things, but curing death is a bigger win.
Yeah.
And so like this is just I think a like the point of the post I guess is almost too. It's like if it was as simple as like what's like written there, it'd be like one sentence, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the point is the subtext of like no, there's actually big problems that we need to actually solve. The really, really, really big problems. That's how I read it.
And he does say that if two deaf children are sleeping on railroad tracks and someone screams at you to go save them, if you run up, save one, and then just kind of leave the other one there, hang out, have a cigarette, and I'm screaming, quick, go save the second one too! And Eliezer says, I already saved one, so I'm unimaginably ahead on points, because one life is unimaginably valuable. I don't need to do another unimaginably good deed, and that just does not seem right at all.
Plus, you'd lose points for not saving the second.
That's so weird.
What's so weird?
Like, that doesn't even make sense by the definition of that worldview.
I don't know if
Like, isn't the goal to save an unimaginably huge amount of good things?
you already did that when you saved one, because it's unimaginably valuable. So yeah,
It's also a fun like intuition pump for like taboo trade-offs,
yeah.
right? Like I'm not going to bankrupt my hospital to buy one liver to save this little girl, because like we need to keep the hospital running.
Mm-hmm.
So
I hate this.
Before we continue,
By the way, I was going to say that one thing I dislike about these posts is Julia Galoff once said that rationalists try and work hard to get rid of the word should from our vocabulary because it distracts from the reality that is there. And the reality that is there, humans are sensitive to faces and individuals. So if we know that humans are scope insensitive, instead of saying humans should be changed into beings who don't have this scope insensitivity, let's accept it as a fact of human nature until we can genetically modify ourselves and work on creating tools that work around it.
Effective
like
altruism.
Sending people pictures and stuff.
like what?
Effective altruism and using those very mental biases to encourage us in more intelligent donations.
This post does have a last paragraph here, which I have issues with, and originally I wanted to not talk about it at all because I considered him a metic hazard, but then I figured, one, that would be cowardly, and two, people who read this post are going to see it anyway, so I'm going to say right now that this next section of our podcast is a memetic hazard. You should probably avoid it if you already have problems with guilt and super high scrupulosity. Is that how you pronounce it? Okay. Because this will be bad for you. So
scrupulosity?
Yeah, feeling very responsible for everything.
Oh, I call that heroic responsibility.
Well, this is more of the bad version of that thing.
Yes.
This is also in my in my head. It's always been a bad version too, but I totally get it. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Oh,
fine.
okay. I always thought of heroic responsibility as a good thing.
Method rationality kind of gave it a great spin.
Yeah.
But the way that I've had a complex like that, I've gotten over it. I guess partly, mainly by stopping caring. I guess about stuff. I guess. But anyway, so I'll call it scrupulosity from now on. So all right.
Yeah. So this next part, again, probably bad for people's emotional well-beings, and I would skip forward by about 5 minutes if you are in that. But going forward, he points out that combining scope insensitivity, the last post, with this one, if you were that guy who had the two children on the train tracks and you only saved one and didn't save the other one as if you could have, not only did you not save that. You're not the person who saved one life. You are the person who killed one life when you could have, because you could have saved the other one. So you have damned yourself, he says. You have damned yourself as thoroughly as any murderer, which he puts at the end of a sentence, at the end of a paragraph, saying that, basically talking about donating money to curing fatal diseases, right? He says, when human lives are at stake, we have a duty to maximize, not satisfies. And this duty has the same strength as the original duty to save lives. So basically, if you have any money left over after you're done providing for your own continued existence, all of it should go to save other people, is how I have interpreted these sorts of things before, and that really leads to a horrible life very quickly.
Yeah, he also mentions that you should be disdained for your spending your life-saving money inefficiently.
It's yeah. So it'd be
Well, wait. I have a question. Does Eliezer Yudkowsky know anything about mental health and like maybe people needing things like little luxuries to keep themselves sane instead of just becoming robots that give money to other
I
people?
think this is a common criticism.
Yeah, yes.
and it's like I think I mean I imagine well maybe he doesn't drink coffee, but I imagine Eliezer spends some of his time like I mean he does. In
Yeah.
fact, this was actually something I remember him being called out for in the comments when he mentioned they had a girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what do you mean you hang out with your girlfriend? Aren't you like busy saving the world?
Mm-hmm.
How can you justify spending 3 hours watching a movie when those 3 hours could bring the end of human death forward by 5 seconds?
Right.
How many people did you just kill, Eliezer?
Yeah.
So like, I think I don't remember. Actually, I remember his response to that. It was like grossly inadequate. It was like those like quotes where like you're not like typing. It's like quote like shows girlfriend's comments. Yeah, they're being super mean, aren't they? I wonder if I'm sure there's more rebuttal to that somewhere else in deeper comments somewhere in later posts. But like, yeah, people need to live and be happy. Some people, like Will McCaskill, does this. He lives on, I think, like 37,000 pounds a year,
Mm-hmm.
and the
And
rest
donates
he
all the
gets,
rest.
yeah, and the rest he gives to charity.
And I mean, this is where the same Peter Singer's argument with the drowning child is basically the same thing, right? If you see a child drowning, you should sacrifice your $2,000 suit to wade into that river and save it, which is true, but he uses that again to lead people to, why are you not donating all your money? You don't need a $2,000 suit. Buy a $100 suit and spend that extra money saving dying people.
yeah, and I mean,
But that ignores time.
I mean,
Like, if I have to dive into 100 lakes and save 100 kids, I'm gonna drown. I'm gonna be too tired.
Right.
Like, the goal is not to just burn yourself out, and anyone who is encouraging you to give to the point of burning out, or any mentality that says that, is shallow and selfish. It's short-sighted. We should be like smarter than that. We should say give as much as you can so that it is sustainable and that you can live your life the longest and healthiest way possible, because that's the way you actually maximize.
Yeah.
David said it here first that Will McCaskill is selfish and
Short-sighted.
short-sighted.
I'll
I mean, I
fight
know
him.
we've talked about this
I'll
at
fight
length
him.
before in a prior episode. I think we spent an entire episode on it at one point, where this just doesn't work very well with humans, especially when we draw these things out to their quote-unquote logical conclusions.
So it's the logical conclusion, like an economic argument is the logical conclusion of something, right? But it's not taking into account like how people work. And so like Peter Singer's essay that the Feminine Affluence and Morality one in 1975 or 6 that had the little drowning kid in the pond parable was all about that, right? So like the key is like at some point, and like he's not even necessarily saying you should do this. Like he's not straight up about like buying a cup of coffee, but like the coffee you buy could have gone to something way more important than the coffee for you. But I think it was Slate Star Codex? I must have been, where it's like, look, if you give 5%, if you give 1%, but if you do anything, you're doing better than almost everybody.
Yes.
And so like you don't have to worry about being perfect, just do good if you want to. And
The Slate Star Codex post about 10% is one of the best posts I know of for making life livable for people who care about others.
Yeah, and for me, it's just the switch. Like, I eat I try to eat a somewhat ethical diet. I eat meat fairly commonly, but not as commonly as many people.
Mm-hmm.
But like, there's still less animals dying from my diet than there used to be, and so like it's not so much about like I can never touch chicken because ever if this was ever produced in a factory that was near chickens, like I'm not gonna take it to some like to that kind of like religious level of commitment. But it's like, no, I'm doing better. Like the world's a better place than it was if I was doing the normal thing. But I cut off just a minute ago. I was just excited to get going. Sorry.
Oh, I forget what I was gonna say.
Shoot, I'm sorry.
It's alright.
So I basically agree with the concrete example that if you can save 2 children from a train and you only save one and then walk away, you're basically murdering the other one. And I also agree with the fact that if you're giving $1,000 to a charity to make people have shoes, you should probably feel bad about that, because giving people shoes isn't really that big a deal when there's people dying. Spend the $1,000 in a more efficient manner, please. This really does matter to a lot of people. But I think there definitely needs to be a line drawn at the place that makes life still livable for people following your philosophy, and I feel like Eliezer absolutely failed to draw that line and make that distinction in this post.
Also, I think this forgets something really important, which is the reason life is livable is not just that we have our base needs met, but the fact that there are things that are beautiful in our lives that give them that sense of meaning. And if you are living a life where every single resource you have that isn't going towards your survival is going towards other people, you are denying yourself the very thing that makes life livable for other humans. It's not just like negative, it's like actively punishing yourself.
Okay, and I said listeners only have to skip ahead for 5 minutes, so we should probably cut it off there. And for next episode, our 2 posts will be Risk-Free Bonds Aren't and Correspondence Bias.